3 o'clock. And it looks like we have a forum. I am sure of that. Let's have a motion on the consent items. Oh, yeah, we got to do introductions. I forgot about that. Let's go around the room and do introductions. We'll start with Jim.
Jim Moore, at large.
Roy Rosenthal, Manitou Springs.
Shelley Roars, League of Women Voters.
Andrew Rediger, at large.
Bill Bowes, Park County.
Tamara Dipner, City of Colorado Springs.
Ed Dills, Rama.
Sharon Brown, City of Fountain.
Patty Bencher, City of Colorado Springs.
Donna Wood, NEPCO.
Warren Childers, at large.
John DeVoe, Woodland Park.
Miley Foster, El Paso County.
Jessica McMullen with PPACG.
Tim O'Donnell, Kono, and in the audience. Good. All right, now we can move on to the consent agenda. Do we have any changes, modifications, corrections to the agenda, additions? Yes.
Yes, I noticed that Terry Hayes was not listed as an attendee at the last meeting, but she was here. I was sitting next to her, so I wanted to make
Okay.
that correction.
That'll be in the minutes section, right?
Oh, pardon me.
Yep, no, not a problem. Any additions to the agenda, changes, anything? We have a pretty full agenda, so we'll march through it today.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
All right.
With the correction.
Have a second with Jim. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? All right. Public comments.
Do you have any comments for items not on the agenda?
Well, we have the safety crash data presentation. Say. So let's just move ahead with that. I imagine that's why you're here. I didn't see any frequent flyers out there, so I didn't think we had.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me back. So usually when I talk about safety, it's doom and gloom, but I think there's a lot of things to celebrate from 2019 as compared to 2018. Some things to learn and a lot of things to share with you guys. So stop me at any time if you have any questions you want to ask. So I'll just get on with it. So we're going to do an overview, and then we're going to talk about CDOT county trends, statewide transportation safety plan, and then our new initiative, Whole System, Whole Safety. So if you're not familiar with CDOT Region 2, it's kind of Park County, then south to the west to Kansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. So it's a pretty big region. Region 2 covers. So, and looking back last year as compared to 2018. So as you can see, 2018 was a pretty bad year for statewide fatalities. We had 627. Last year we had 596, so it's a 31 fatality reduction, which is significant probably since 2013. It's just been a climb. So it's good. We have 1 year down. But I think what really shines here is Region 2, we had a 47 fatality reduction. So I think I'll show you some things, and I think really El Paso County is one of our biggest focus areas. Usually statewide is the #1 county with the highest fatality rate. So it's no longer the case from 2019. They've slipped down to -- 2, so that's significant. So there's a lot of things going on. So you can see in El Paso and Teller County, really not, and there's Park County, but Park County contributed 3, Teller 0, I believe. And so there was a 20 fatality reduction in those 3 counties from comparing 2018 to 2019. So this list is hard to see, but it's good. So this, can you read it? Well, it shows that El Paso County had 62 fatalities last year. And usually it's our #1 county with the number. Right now it's at 62. Adams is at 64, followed by Denver, Weld, and then Pueblo. Yep. Did it go up? 66. So maybe I can't read. I'm trying to. I think it says 60. 66. I can't read. Sorry about that. I was trying. So, well, I'm getting older. Everything's getting dimmer, I've noticed. So it's good news. So, and kind of looking at these counties, this is kind of a chop of things. I'd like to know, we do follow these quite a bit, and so these are areas we try to focus on with education and behavior changes. So we're still struggling with motorcycles, right? That's a significant contributor to the overall fatality numbers in El Paso. But there has been some improvements here, and I'll actually get into that. But I just want to give you a snapshot of these are some things we watch with a lot of detail. So another thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm kind of shocked by, because I thought we had a changing trend. So this is statewide, all the accidents. And so last year, Colorado had a little over 15,000. And so in the previous years, we'd seen this trend shifting to the older age, specifically males from 25 to 40. So from last year, it seems like we've shifted quite a bit to the younger crowd. So, I mean, I guess we have it's things to know. It's good data, things to focus on. So there's some work to be done between the 18 and 29-year-old. They're just overrepresented than they have been in the past. So here's kind of, this is CDOT kind of trends and analysis. So older drivers have increased. There's an increase of 2 fatalities from 2018. Good news for younger drivers from 15 to 20. It's a 60% reduction, so I think that's good. Motorcycle fatalities are lower, but they're still overrepresented. And so we have better helmet use, I guess we could say, or about the same. Bicyclists, no change since 2017. It's something to look into. So I think 4 is a big number. I think what's more curious is how many actual bicycle commuters, recreational riders. There's a lot more to dive into this. So it's something we are working on. Pedestrian fatalities. So 2018, there was a lot of effort on pedestrians with Colorado Springs Police Department, the MPO. We all got together and talked about pedestrians and what we can do to make it better for them. And I know the City of Springs has done some really good stuff with their signal timing and the way they do things. So they've really prioritized safety over operations. And so I think you see a big swing, and I think 10's a good reduction. I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. But it's a win, right? So we're going in the right direction. Passenger vehicle occupant, that's good. That's a really good, significant reduction. Without seatbelt use, so 35 as compared to 59. We do spend quite a bit of money educating seatbelt. We do not have a primary seatbelt law. I don't think we'll get one anytime soon, but the trend is going down, so I think this is good. So here's something really significant, and this is the first time I've ever seen this, and I think we're getting this message out, and we're trying to figure out why. Usually on-system fatalities are highway fatalities. So usually you associate, and it's always usually the norm that highways have more fatalities, and so you're going to associate that with congestion and speed, right? So for this year, we've actually had more off-system, so local roads, collectors, arterials. They've shown, so we have 60 off-system as compared to 57. So, which is still a reduction for off-system, right? So both have gone down. So I think there's just a lot more partnering to do, and I think CDOT's taking some really good, exciting steps. So I think you'll be seeing those in the upcoming year, and I can talk a little about those, but I think it's significant. So it's good, but I think there's room, right? Impaired drivers, there's a lot of education. I'm sure everyone's seen a video or some kind of effort to educate and try to change behavior here. So that's a huge reduction. So 29 as compared to 57. It was a rough year last year for construction zone-related fatalities. We did have 3. So here's kind of that dip. So 2011, or 2010, we kind of hit down. And so there's a lot of effort trying to understand why this is weather-related, economics, or what's the correlating factor. And if you can figure it out, I think a lot of people will be really excited. I mean, I'm sure there's multiple factors, but we do take a look at big data, small data, so the macro, the micro, we look at it all and we track it all. It's good to say we've gone up. I like that we're going down. So this year is a pretty big year. So, but our statewide transportation safety plan. So we have to do these every 5 years. Our last one was 2014, so it just expired, and so we just kicked off a new effort, and we have one in place. It was a pretty exciting effort, and so we worked with a lot of stakeholders throughout the region, including PPACG. So everyone came up with the vision. The future of Colorado is 0 deaths, and that's what we've all agreed to, and serious injuries. And so we've set a target, and it aligns with some of the things done at PPACG. So we're doing a 15% reduction from 2019 to 2023. And so I think that number will be echoed in a lot of things that you'll be seeing. So that's our goal. And so I did want to show this. So the dark blue is the lead, the circle in the blue is the lead sport, and the orange is the partner. So these kind of are tier 1 strategies we are going after for this next period. And the MPO coordinate with existing safety-focused agency programs, CDOT, whole system, regional and local safety programs. So I think the really good news is PPACG and CDOT work really well together. I mean, I don't mean to gloat, but there's some great guys working for the MPO, and they're proactive and they reach out to CDOT, and we do a lot of partnering. So I think that's one of the contributing factors to our reduction in fatalities, is just creating those partnerships. So we do have a whole system, whole safety. So last year, CDOT, and I'll get into how we fund safety projects. I'm going to kind of get into that, and it's kind of a competitive process. But last year, CDOT identified a few low-hanging countermeasures that we could do, and so we set aside a small pot of fund. And so there's no need to compete for it, you just request it. And so some of the things we're covering there are 6-inch striping. So on our edge lines, they're 4 inches, so we're going to a 6-inch. And so that's going to prevent off-road. We found some good data on that on your rural 2-lane roads. Rumble strips. So MASH compliance. So MASH is a fancy word for the way the federal government crash tests safety devices. And so we need to get into compliance. So what has changed since the last test standard is vehicles have gotten heavier and taller. So the feds have made you crash any kind of product you're going to put on highways to these standards. So we have money to bring up, and specifically we're going after guardrail. So the end change is a 4-inch higher guardrail, a little more beefier end section. And variable speed limits and cable rail. So Region 2 has been quite the benefactor of this. It's only $11 million a year, and every 5 region competes for it. So we've really gotten lucky so far last year with our cable rail. So we did get quite a bit of portion of that money for I-25, so I'm pretty excited. We do have a big request, and I think so. The request is about $30 million a year, and we only have $11 million. So I don't know how it gets distributed. But I think we're asking the Transportation Commissioner to fund one-time $80 million, and then a second one-time funding of $90 million, and then to sustain a $20 million funding source for this. And I know you guys are curious on how we do safety project funding. And it's kind of elusive, but it's pretty straightforward. So if I lose you guys, stop me, ask questions. So I'm going to talk about HSIP, which is just our federal safety dollars. So basically you have to do a benefit cost calculation. And so you look at a segment, you look at history of accidents, and depending on how many people get hurt or how many fatalities you have, it qualifies for a greater funding. And so it's compared to the countermeasure you're doing, which has a specific reduction. So I pulled up an example. The type is replaced with roundabout. So the feds have said if you take a signalized intersection and replace it with a roundabout, you'll reduce property damage accidents by 35%, reduce injury accidents by 76%, and fatality occurrences by 76%. So we kind of go through that. And we have countermeasures for hundreds of items. So it's a way to be competitive and kind of compete with other projects. I know it's the kind of the dark side of what I do, but we're doing good. So any questions on HSIP and benefit cost, BC ratios? Yeah. Okay.
You turn your mic on.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
it's the guy with the mouth talking. That's what it is. You were saying that roundabouts were safer than a signaled intersection?
Yes.
Is that what I heard you say? Which is hard to imagine because it seems like they're 10 times more confusing for some people.
So what you'll see is specifically the injury levels go down, right? So you might have just as many accidents in a roundabout due to the confusion and the older driving population. There's several factors that contribute, but it's so low speed, the chances of getting hurt are pretty low.
It's probably because of the slower speed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good question. It's true. It's true. Okay. And we also have faster safety, so it's a little bit more flexible. So for the federal government, we like to get a benefit cost ratio of 2. And then we do compete. Every region has an allocation. And so we compete and we prioritize all our projects. There is a bigger need than we do have money. Faster safety, that benefit cost ratio requirement is lowered, so it's more allows you to do a systemic approach. And so if you have guardrail on a 10-mile segment, but you're missing a mile, but there's been no crashes in that mile to really get a good BC, faster safety will allow you actually to fill that gap just from a kind of a common sense. Let's just close the last hole. So, so here are some of kind of those factors. I knew I'd get some questions, and it's just a screenshot. So, I mean, if you look at the countermeasure, it's in access. If you do a raised median, you can see your fatal will be reduced by 39%, injury 39%, and property damage 39%. So there's a lot of these countermeasures, and we've defined them. And there's a lot of studies, a lot of data done. And it's all across the states that pulls this data and makes these values. So, that's it. And I just want to move towards 0 deaths. And yes, sir.
On that last slide, those are based on historic figures?
Yep.
Is that where the ratios come from?
Studies, yes.
And are they revisited and validated annually? Do you know?
No, so what CDOT does, and it's really good, it's called the before and after study. And so we take what the application BC, benefit cost ratio, was. So say that signal we were talking about, we did a roundabout, and we said the BC was 1.75 in our application. So we'll do it, and we'll let it run, and then 3 years we'll come back and actually calculate the actual BC. And that's in a report that we put online. So it holds us accountable and says, hey, you're doing really good, or think about what you're doing.
So I know you track on system, off system. Do you track in the municipality itself, so within the city limits of Colorado Springs as opposed to outside?
Yeah, I mean, so everyone for now, and there's a lot of talk about this, so all accidents are supposed to go to the Department of Revenue. I don't know why, and so they kind of code it and go through the report. Then CDOT gets that version, and we have to kind of wash it again, and we can put it into our program. So all accidents, so yes, in reality they do. I think there's a big desire, because right now we're doing really good. We have a 6-month lag behind when we get that data and it's all washed. So CDOT has offered and is still wanting to take that role on for all, for the Department of Revenue. So all local agencies, sheriffs, CSP would send accident reports to CDOT directly, and we'd do all that washing and coding in-house the first time and share with everybody.
So, but is your kind of perception, or whatever you want to call it, that there's more accidents in the city or outside the city limits?
In the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Yep.
Is it possible for Jessica to email us a copy of your PowerPoint here?
Yeah, I finished it this morning, so if there's spelling corrections, I'm an engineer, I don't know how to spell, so don't
Okay.
hold me to it.
No, it's something I'd like to look at. That
Sure.
I can't really
Yeah,
dig
absolutely.
into it with this. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, let's move on to 4A, thanks. Catherine's up 3 times already, so.
Afternoon, Catherine Winger, Senior Transportation Planner. Get my stuff together. So before the meeting, I handed out an updated version of this memo. The only really change is the summary, just to clarify what's happening with the three boxes, not the first item, but the last 3 items. And so that was just a clarification that TAC wanted us to hand out to you all to make sure you understood what was going on with that. So this is a request to amend our TIP, the 2019 through 2022 Transportation Improvement Program, our short-range transportation plan that lists all federally funded projects in the next 4 years. And all of those projects and significant projects are required to be in this plan in order to be eligible for federal funding. And so every once in a while, we do need to adjust the TIP to make sure that we are up to date and everything, all costs and projects are listed in that document. And so these requests, the first one is from CDOT. This is to add funds and update the funds or phase costs for a project on I-25 and State Highway 21. This is part of that interchange that's going in, but this is just the stormwater basin, which CDOT is funding. The main interchange is being funded privately through Copper Ridge. And so this is to add state water quality funds in the amount listed in 21 and 22, and those are state funds. And there was also some money left over from the design phase that they are moving over into construction as well.
So just to clarify,
Yes.
For some of the newer people or whatever, this intersection at I-25 and State Highway 21, which is Powers, right? It's going to be right close to the North Gate entrance for Academy, so there's going to be bam, bam, 2 of them right there. And it goes kind of towards Powers, but it doesn't really connect to Powers yet, right?
Not yet, correct. Phase 1 is the intersection and then into Interquest.
So it's kind of the intersection of nowhere, but it'll be there.
Eventually, there's a where it's going. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then, so the next 3 items you'll see are all kind of connected as far as the TIP amendment request. So we have CMAQ money, which is congestion mitigation and air quality. We have TAP funds, those are transportation alternatives, multimodal, and then we also have STP Metro. These are all federal funds. They all have different requirements, but some of these projects can get both types of funding. However, our CMAQ money is we're no longer going to be eligible after June, and this is because we've gone into air quality attainment for carbon monoxide. I always forget what we are. And so we are no longer going to be eligible for CMAQ funds. So we need to spend that money as soon as possible or before the June deadline. And so we needed to swap some funds around to make sure that that money gets spent by then. And so what you see here is putting all the money into, all the CMAQ money into Route 8, which will be spent or obligated, as we like to say in federal terms, by that time, and then some STP Metro will go into the MMT Route 12. Thank you. It's hard to keep straight all the things that happen. And then some TAP funds will go into 30th Street. And so there was 3-way swap just to keep the minimum amount of fund types in projects, but also make sure that we spend that money. And so that's what the clarification summary is about there in the request. And so TAC recommends approval to the board, and we're asking for your recommendation to the board as well.
And again, could you explain the 30th Street, the scope of that, what that's all about?
The 30th Street scope?
Improvement, yeah.
Yes, I don't remember that one, because that was last month's request. 30th Street. Are you talking about last month's request where they
Well, no, I
needed more
mean
funds?
specifically what the project is.
The 30th Street is I'm not sure on that one, since that's a good question. I will have to look that up.
Yeah.
I can't remember what that project
Yeah, I'd like to have that
specifically is.
clarified in my mind, is it a bridge, is it an intersection, is it a what that they're doing?
It's not a bridge or intersection. I believe it's a reconstruction of the roadway, so it's not a bridge. And I think it includes an intersection as well, but it's not just an intersection.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's north of 24?
I think it goes by the Garden of the Gods Visitor Center.
Yeah,
that
right,
whole area.
right.
Last month I brought a map.
Yeah.
No. Just as long as we know it's between, like you're saying, it was Tamara? Okay, all right. So just so everybody has a picture in their mind, what part of the,
Thank you. It's like I knew I had all this
Streets being
information
done.
last month.
because we talk about these things and we just throw them up as tip amendments, or we talk about the 30th Street project, or we talk about this, that, and the other thing. And a lot of times, if you don't know what it is. Okay? Any other questions
Yes.
on 4A? Yep.
I'm just looking at the updated costs, and, I mean, these are large numbers to get your head around, but it seems like a significant percentage increase, like almost 40% or something like that. Do you know if there's any specific reason the original costs were so incorrect?
Are you talking about for the CDOT project specifically?
Yeah, the Amendment 13, where it's asking for like $3 million one year, then about $2 million the other 2 years.
I think that at that point they didn't have design, and so, or they didn't have an exact number, but I'm going to have to ask CDOT to clarify on why those costs
Okay.
went up. Do you happen to know? The I-25 and Powers interchange, stormwater basin.
Bids, yeah, so the bid came in significantly higher than we went out advertising for that project, so that's the increase. So, yeah, you'll have to figure out the very exact numbers, but we had $8 million was the budget was announced in, I don't recall that exactly. That's crazy.
Okay, thanks. And sometimes we put things in the tip before, like for design, and we don't know what the construction is yet, and so we come back and we have to do an amendment to add in the construction phase when they know those amounts, and so that sometimes happens as well.
Any other questions?
That new interchange, how close is that going to be to where that north entrance is to the Air Force Academy? How far away is that? Pretty close?
It's about a mile south of
Is that really what's kind of the missing link for Powers coming around and coming into I-25, the extension?
There's I'd say two portions of it.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shane Ferguson.
Forgive me if I stutter here. But on Powers Boulevard, there's really two portions that are missing link, if you will, on the north end. One of them is currently being constructed, which is essentially Voyager to I-25, and then the second portion of it would be Voyager to around to 83. And that portion is not under construction nor design at this time.
Okay. Because I recall when Bass Pro Shop and that whole area was developed out there, there was a TIF schedule set up. They said that was blighted area, which was a stretch. But anyway, it was supposed to generate money
Correct.
for the completion of that. How's that coming along?
Well, so a portion of those monies is what is paying for that interchange in that section, and then I believe that system is to continue to help pay for the portion between Voyager and 83.
So it's coming into fruition.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Jim?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that interchange is really tied into the North Gate interchange.
There is.
There isn't a separate, we won't be having a separate interchange. We'll be driving over
Correct.
the roadway that are accessed, but they come off of the two traffic circles
Yeah, when I say it's about a mile south, I'd say
Yeah.
the majority of it. But yes, you're correct. There actually is off-ramps that are going to be tying to that north gate end as well. I don't have an exhibit handy, but I know
It's
through
going to
our
be very
website.
interesting.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, signage is going to be critical, I'll tell you that right now.
Absolutely.
Because people getting off are thinking they're going to the Air Force Academy and they're going to end up at Focus or someplace, I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. All right, any more questions, clarification for this 4A? I need a motion to recommend for approval.
So moved.
Second? Don. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. On to 4B.
And I'm actually going to hand it back over to Shane to talk about this one as well.
All right.
Right, so this section is really talking about the two handouts that we've passed out. We're calling them the pipeline of projects. I'll say the first page is the larger list of projects, and I'll discuss that first. So on the top, we have a yellow section that I'm calling Senate Bill 267 projects. And those projects are currently being funded and currently being designed and put out to construction here in the near future. What we're wanting to identify with this list of projects is in the future, within the next 5 to 10 years, if we were to get additional funding for projects, what would be our priority in moving forward with the next round of projects? So since the first set have been identified, what we're coming before you with today is to propose on the next set of priorities. They're not currently identified for funding, but we are being asked to be constrained to about $160 million worth of construction projects here in the Pikes Peak area. And what would we ask of this community to be our priorities of interest for on-system projects? And so what I have here is, for the next 4 projects identified, Powers Boulevard and Airport Road, US 24 East, widening from Garrett to Woodman Road. The next phase, or next project, is I-25 HOV lanes, so there'd be a 4th lane, and we're saying from Cimarron to North Nevada. And then the last project would be 24 West, which is US 24 over Ridge Road, and currently that is an intersection. And I'll say on each of these projects, they're currently been identified in a planning document through an EA, or I believe for the US 24 widening Garrett to Woodman, it's a PEL, but it's still a environmental planning document. And so that this list is what we're asking to, I guess, consideration on if this is continued priorities as we move forward, if additional funding were to come about within years 5 to 10 out. Again, we do not have funding currently for these projects, but this would be our next round of priority of projects that we would like to try to take care of and address.
Has planning been done on these projects?
Yeah, so these are a part of the long-range plan of projects, and so I think in the long-range plan, it's been identified as corridors, but what's being asked of us now is, can you drill it down and specify projects that you would like to see specifically versus a corridor project, corridor identification.
Are there designs that can be seen, or?
For each of these projects, there have not been any design work done, so it's very early stages. And so we haven't, I'd say that in each of the corridor planning documents, there's conceptual ideas as to what it would look like, but we have not done any engineering or design on these projects as of this time.
Okay.
And then the bottom list, the gray, are additional projects for consideration, but you can take a look there. We've tried to look across really our community here with Powers Boulevard, 24, I-25, 67, et cetera. So. Questions? Yes, Patty.
Thank you. On the I-25 HOV lanes, are you going to be, is that a plan to eliminate an existing lane or to add an additional HOV lane?
So the environmental document, the EA for the I-25 corridor, identifies it as a fourth lane, an additional lane, and in that EA, it's identified as an HOV lane. I think, yes.
Any other questions?
So
John?
the impact of possible Space Force setting out there, will there be federal dollars involved for those corridors that will be able to assist some of the things we've looked at as far as going out to Schriever and those different avenues going out that way for improvement?
Yeah, so there are federal dollars for each of these projects contributing to the construction and design of the projects, but not specifically military invested dollars, I would say that. But yes, we do have federal funding, federal tax essentially coming to each of these projects.
Because if we get that awarded, that would be a good possibility for getting some increased revenue for that.
Yes, sir.
We hope.
So that is the, any additional questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
So I'm fairly new, second meeting. So my question is, adding an HOV lane, and I hear fatalities decreased to 0, right, which is a great goal.
Great design.
To me, to get there, you reduce the number of people on the road is a possibility, right? And again, excuse me for just being new, but can you tie in light rail and plan long-term, 10 years out? I mean, I know 10 years out, but I would think we would have some type of light rail in 10 years?
So currently, none of these projects identify any light rail, I would say. But that being said, that is an initiative that we're starting to look into and starting to identify potential corridors. If you look up and down I-25, there's definitely a lot of constraints, and what would that look like if we did have light rail there versus potentially other alignments? There's a lot of early, I'd say, investigation at this time as to what that would look like in this community. But that discussion is starting. I would say starting. It's been going on for a couple of years, but it is on the initial phases. Yeah.
Okay, according to the federal transportation planning thing, the mid-cycle update that we're going to be getting, right, I think today, having the region split into an MPO and TPR, what are those things?
I may defer to John to help get.
I'm sorry, in the mid-cycle update, the federal transportation planning, having the region split into an MPO and TPR creates challenges in coordinating a seamless transportation network. What are those things? MPO, TPR.
John, you explain these things better, actually, so I'm going to let you do that.
So where
I know
are you
them, but
getting,
John-
is that part of this?
It is. It's a part of today's.
Well, yeah, but is it part of 4B?
No, it is not, but
Farther
it is
down.
in our transportation planning. I'm sorry, we're in DOT, and it's all transportation. I figured it was kind of all together. It just kind of.
Okay, we'll get clarification on the definitions, and then we'll deal with that one when it comes up in the other, what is it, 4C, 4C? Okay, but it's a good idea to get definitions for the MPO and all that.
So the way, for those of you who don't know me, John Leosatos, I'm the Transportation Director here at PPACG. So the way that transportation is sort of planned within the state of Colorado is the state is divvied up into 15 different transportation planning regions, or TPRs. The first 5 of those TPRs 1 through 5, also meet the federal requirement or designation for a Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO. Any urbanized area over 50,000 in population is required to be a Metropolitan Planning Organization by federal regulations. Those basically, the MPO requirements are that you do a transportation improvement program, which Catherine already brought to you, an amendment to our transportation improvement program, and also that we do a long-range transportation plan, or RTP. Our RTP, for those of you who have been on the committee for a while, got adopted back in January, I believe, right?
Yep.
So for those of you who've seen some of these elements before. So the way that the TPRs are sort of drawn, and I'll just I want to put this in context of what you're reading from, even though we're going to do the UPWP here shortly, is that the MPO boundaries are based on census urbanized area. So you have to have a certain population within that census block, and they sort of connect the dots, and that creates the MPO boundary. So the MPO boundary for Pikes Peak is basically, kind of wish I had a map, but it's basically sort of all of Colorado Springs, Monument, Palmer Lake, Manitou, Fountain, Woodland Park, but it's not all of unincorporated El Paso County. So that's part of the challenge for poor El Paso County, is it's got 1 foot in the TPR realm, which gets money directly from the state and is administered by CDOT, versus also being in the MPO, or the middle part of it is in the MPO, and having to go through all those federal rules. So El Paso County, think of it basically divvied up into 3 parts. There's eastern El Paso County, part of TPR 14, or Central Front Range. That goes through a CDOT process. The middle part, that again also shares with some of the other cities, as well as some of urbanized El Paso County, unincorporated El Paso County, as the MPO or TPR number 1, which is Pikes Peak. And then there's sort of that western part of El Paso County, which belongs also in Central Front Range, or TPR 14. So that's what we mean when we talk about that. And again, happy to chat with you, since, like I said, this is your second meeting. Happy to give you the sort of Transportation 101 anytime you'd like to get together. Just give us a call. We'll come out to see you, or you can, if you're downtown, come by and visit us. And I will bore you to tears with all of the transportation stuff.
That's the major challenge of this committee, quite frankly, is the acronyms.
Yeah.
So
I
if you can
will
get
say
that
really
down.
quickly, and Jessica, if you don't mind sending it out, there is the Front Range Passenger Rail Initiative is already underway. They've hired a consultant, and so they are looking at doing that very study that Shane had talked about, of sort of determining where would it go, how much would it cost, what's the governance. All of those sorts of questions are being undertaken right now as part of that study. I think they carved out like $1 million or something. I think it's HDR that's doing it. So there is a website that I will get to Jessica, and she'll send it out to all of you, and you can look at the Front Range Passenger Rail study site. They also have another website, but that's, again, all of their activities, and I think you specifically want to get what's going on with the study. So we'll happily send that along to you.
Okay. Catherine just updated me on 4B as intended to be an info item in this meeting, and it won't come up as an action item until next meeting.
Right.
So we don't need a motion or anything for this. This is more informational about which of the projects, if we got funding, which of the projects kind of bubbled up to the top.
Yeah, when we passed out those handouts to the TAC, they said, yeah, this is great and okay, but we need to run it by our bosses. We'd like to table this. So they've tabled it till next month. So obviously, they may make changes, but either way, if they make changes or not, it'll come back to you again next month for action. So at this time, we were thinking this would be an action item, but unfortunately, at this point, more information is needed, so it is an informational item only.
Okay. Jim?
Are all of these in the tip? All of
No.
these projects in the tip right now?
No, all of the projects that we're talking about are the if the money falls from the sky category, which I think is a very technical term I learned in college.
Yes, it is.
It basically means they do not have funding. If they had funding, they would be in the tip. These are projects that are looking to get into find funding and get into the tip. That being said, I believe almost all of them are in the long-range plan. All of them are.
Better be.
And so if they do get funding, it's easier to move them forward.
Okay, but I understood they may be in the long-range plan as corridor concepts, not with the same specificity in this list, correct?
They would need to be consistent with, right.
Yeah, and so I'd say within the corridor concepts, if you will, they have been identified as needed projects.
Okay.
And so for instance, in an EA, each of these locations
The
on
environmental
power.
assessment, for those who are scoring at home.
Environmental assessment, our planning document, each of these powers corridor interchanges have been identified.
But what I heard you say earlier, and just for clarification, is that the long-range plan speaks to it more broadly.
Correct. Yes, sir.
But this really gets us down to what would the individual projects look like.
the individual projects that we would want to
Yeah.
prioritize next.
And I assume that the slice and dice of the HOV, the I-25 HOV, represents where you're seeing the heaviest traffic, the heaviest need first, and then we'll try to address the north and south parts
Correct.
later. Okay.
A part of that, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, but it's also what we can afford. Because remember,
Correct.
that list is fiscally constrained at the 162.
And, yes.
So just remember, when we say HOV, that's really managed lane, and when it comes to fruition, could be any sort of lane, including toll. So just make sure you understand, those terms are interchangeable, and I think that's one thing that people have been sort of wrapped around the axle around is that. So let's make sure that everyone knows that up front, that even though this is something that's not funded, it is down the run, it could be toll, but that's a decision that'll be made at a different time.
Patty, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question about the I-25 CO94 improvements project. Where is that intersection at? I'm trying to picture that in my head, and I can't. And is that
That's
related to
the
the
one that
Space
is
Command
funded.
preparation
The
at
second one
Peterson?
down.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it is funded, and so it's actually not an intersection, I'm sorry, but that project itself is a conglomeration of 4 different locations, I-25, as well as 94, and then we're partnering with El Paso County and PPRTA on South Academy and Charter Oaks Ranch Road, but this is more of a description. It's a safety improvement project.
The build grant?
That is the build grant that we received
In the
in the
paper,
fall.
about 6 months ago, when you read about the build grant and all the money coming to the military communities and Senator Gardner, that's that project.
Yeah.
We received a federal grant to
In-
move forward on that.
So in order to make that project whole financially, we've contributed not only build grant funding, but Senate Bill 267, as well as a number of different assets that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on 4B, informational item?
I will say, yeah, I'll say real quick, there is also a transit list of projects. Now, that is in your packet as well. I would say that with respect to number 1, 2, and 4, that's definitely more of Colorado Springs, and so I'm limited knowledge on those specifics for those projects, if you were to ask me. But number 3, the desire is to have a Mustang mobility hub, if you will, down in Fountain, off that exit. And so,
Okay. All right, on to 4C.
thank you.
Where are we now? So, powers extension, make sure I'm on the right one. Okay, so this one is for action item.
Yes,
Sorry about
this
that,
is action.
everybody. Sometimes the CAC packet goes out before the TAC makes their decisions, so we don't have time to kind of shift those priorities. All right, so this one is for South Powers Extension Corridor Study funding. So we're not actually going to be talking about giving it any funding. It's just about trying to enable this corridor study to be able to compete for funding. So the regional partners, El Paso County, Fountain, Colorado Springs, CDOT, and PPACG, have been looking for a way to fund a Power South corridor study. And this would be to study the area that would connect Powers to I-25. And so it's a south connection, not the north connection that is kind of getting worked on now, but to continue on and make sure that we have a continuous 21 corridor. And so the first step would be to study that, find an alignment. We do actually already have kind of a feasibility study that was done some years back, but it needs to be updated so that we can move forward a little bit on that project as well. And so in order to fund the study, we've been looking at multiple avenues. One of them is potentially getting federal funding and possibly some cost overrun money that might come back to the region. So sometimes we have some projects that close out and they don't need all of their funds, or we have other funds that come to us that fall out of the sky, as John says. It is. So sometimes that does happen. And so when we do that, we do a cost overrun call for projects for current projects that are already listed in our TIP, and they can say, hey, we're having some issues, we need some more money to finish this project, we'd like to request those funds that you have. And so through the TIP process, we have a certain TIP procedures and policies that we follow. And what's outlined here is the priorities that have been approved by all of the boards to say, so if this money does come back to the region, what is going to be the top priority? And that priority has been, and it still is, projects that need more money. And then the list goes down, fully funded, the construction phase of projects that already have design, and then fund any projects that are in our long-range plan that could be obligate. So really this project falls under bullet 3, and what the request is to be able to compete with other projects that actually fall under that first bullet. And so this would only be a one-time waiver for this specific project to compete for projects or for funding if it were become available. We don't have any money yet. We're hoping some will become available soon. But the request is to allow a waiver for this project to compete, or this study to compete for those funds if they do become available. Hopefully that makes sense, because it's a lot of pieces flying around.
Any questions? Tamara?
Maybe you can remind me, is this process part of our TIP process that we set up when we prioritized?
Yes.
Or is this an unusual circumstance, I guess, and we're setting a new precedent?
So the process that you see here with the bulleted, the priorities there, it's a part of a bigger document, the TIP policies and procedures, which did come to you. We update those every time that we start a new TIP process. So since we're right in the middle of a new TIP process, which you'll see in a later memo, we started last year with updating those policies and procedures and make sure everybody's still okay with the way we've been running. So those were updated about, I think, August or September that you would have seen them. And so this would be a new kind of, it would only be a waiver for this one time. It wouldn't change the document permanently. So it is a new thing that you are seeing as far as this specific item.
And will this set a precedence that we might run into in the future if we allow this one project to be recategorized or be allowed to compete with the bullet 1 criteria, under that criteria?
It's possible, yes. We believe that this is a project that is, regionally significant. Mm-hmm. It's unusual. It's not something that we commonly see, and it's come up as an important thing just recently, kind of trying to figure this out. And so, yes, in a sense, it could set that precedent, but we think that, it still will have to go through the TAC, the CAC, and the board, and so there's still, the long process that it has to go through to make sure that it really is a significant need.
So I 100% support that we do have to have a study for the South Powers to figure out what's the best solution for down there. I just want to make sure, I know there's a City of Colorado Springs is doing a kind of overall mobility study. I just want to make sure that we're spending our money wisely, in the sense we're not studying the same thing over and over and different groups are doing it. I just want to make sure that the conversation is being had between City of Colorado Springs, PPACG, whoever is doing all this, so let's not overlap the same work, if you will. It's all I guess, and that's not really direction to you, but just me throwing out there that we need to be cognizant of that there's so many studies going on. Let's make sure we're not overdoing it.
Yes, we definitely agree. And everybody's come to the table multiple times. We've had a lot of meetings about this, actually, with Colorado Springs and El Paso County. And so definitely everyone is involved. And this specific area is not being studied in other plans. And this is going to dive down deeper into an actual corridor study rather than overlapping, yes, this concept is good kind of idea. It's actually getting down and trying to reserve so that they can reserve right of way. So it's going to be a more specific study that really is needed and is not being done elsewhere.
Will preliminary design be done along with the study with NPL, or
no? I don't.
What
believe
level
so.
of design? I guess.
There won't be preliminary design. That's a bit more specific. Do you know kind of more details?
So a couple of main goals is definitely access control plan, and as well as right-of-way identification. And so we're not going to be looking to do any sort of preliminary design, but more so, and this is definitely a partnership with El Paso County, Fountain, Colorado Springs, but identifying where that alignment and corridor through the planning process, through the environmental process, where are those potential corridors within the north-south connection.
Okay, so when you say access and also right-of-way, what level of design concept do you guys need to be able to determine that?
Well, so ultimately, this corridor will be turned over to CDOT, right? We have our design criteria where we request a right-of-way width on major facilities. And so that's going to be kind of the beginning point.
Okay, the minimum amount, minimum.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Patty?
Are the other regional partners putting any funds into this, or is the intention to have this completely funded through the TIP, should funds become available?
The intention is everyone to come to the table as much as possible, because we do need quite a bit of money. And so even with federal funds, there is a local match requirement. And so regardless of if we spend federal funds, there's still going to have to be local match that comes into them to make sure that they're, putting in their piece as well. So all federal funds that we get typically have to have that local match, even the other ones that you saw during the TIP amendment. And so that is a piece of it. But yes, multiple partners plan to. We're still in discussions, though, so that is why this piece is, we want to put this in place so that we can kind of piece together the funds for the project.
So let me do some active listening here and make sure I understand. Back to Tamara's first concern/question. It's outside of the normal TIP prioritization, but it's not outside of the policy that allows for exceptions to come in.
Correct. It would fall under Bullet 3, and we're asking for it to compete with Bullet 1, with projects in Bullet 1.
Our question was, is that okay? Does that fall along the lines of the policy? We're not violating?
Oh, yeah. And within the document, it does talk about how the TAC members and the CAC and the board all have, they're able to make adjustments to that as they see fit. These are your policies and procedures, and so then you can adjust them as you would like.
Okay, Jim.
I'm not opposed to this, particularly as a planning effort, but it occurs to me in the forget it, I can't do math, number of years that I've been in the community, every so often a question comes up about having some sort of speedy passage around the east side of the metro area. And at one point, Powers came up as part of that. There was a time back in the Stone Age when Academy was supposed to be that answer. And what it seems to me is that maybe, just maybe, this is an interesting potential solution to a problem that is getting out of hand. And that with particularly Banning Lewis Ranch development on the horizon, that we need to move our perspective farther east and start putting these kinds of dollars into providing a solution that's out there. I mean, it's, we don't have the north part, the long-time planned north part of Powers settled yet, and now we're looking to the south end, and I'm just afraid that they're going to have another 10 miles of development east of this, and it's not going to serve what it may sound like we want to do right now.
And there are, actually in the long-range plan, there is also a project for identifying another outer loop in the east as well, knowing that we're growth.
Yeah, that's in the 2100 plan.
Yes. So, yes. People, they know about this, it's in the plans, and we understand that it's growing, but it's hard to keep up with that growth, but we're trying our best.
Yeah, this is the first step, in getting it there. And I think if people knew that they were looking at this, hopefully it'll gain some steam of some kind.
Which is the first step?
This is like
Finishing
the first
Powers.
step. Well, I'm talking about the first step of looking at a south connection.
To finish that piece.
You got to do this first and then follow on. But I don't know how long it's going to take. Yep, you're at your limit. You exceeded your 22 characters or whatever it is. All right. Any other discussion, Patty?
Just one. Who funded the original 2004 feasibility study?
That was before my time. We don't.
That was in Arizona, don't get me.
I guess I'm just curious if
We
one of
can
these
look that
other
up.
regional partners did the original study and are coming back to do it as a larger partnership.
We can look into that. I don't want to.
Just curiosity.
I'm sure they'd have to for that dollar amount.
I mean, I believe that PPACG was involved in that, so I imagine it was regionally
Okay.
coordinated, because that's typically what the PPACG is all about. So, but I'll look at it for you specifically.
All right. Any other discussion? Do I have a motion to recommend? Tamara's second. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes.
Okay. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager, and I am here to talk to you about CAC membership. I know you're all so excited and you can't imagine what I'm talking about. So as you know, the CAC Nominating Committee reviews at-large positions and suggests folks to fill them. In June of last year, you did appoint a nominating committee of Tim O'Donnell as chair, Jim Moore, and Aubrey Day. That is the nominating committee you selected. Our process for citizen at-large appointments has been, if it is the person's first term, to ask them if they are interested in a second term, then ask the committee if they would like to consider that or open it up for additional applicants. The committee would like to consider the reappointment of Aubrey Day as a citizen at-large for a second term. Does the committee have any comments they want to add?
Yep. I fully support it. I think Aubrey is the vice chair, so, look kind of bad if we didn't renew her. But I don't,
I move that we reappoint.
Okay, so you have a motion to move ahead with Aubrey. Patty?
I was going to second Sharon's motion.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're on to the information discussion items. Legislation. You're going to rip through this, right?
Oh, I sure hope so. So, like we mentioned last month, Legislative Committee meets every other week, except for that's now changing. The legislative session is heating up a little bit, so the PPACG Board's Legislative Committee will be meeting every single Monday at 8:30 in the morning to review where legislation is in its process. If there's new legislation proposed, review the bill and take a position. And in addition to that, to follow up on requests from PPACG delegation members on our requests to engage.
With us only meeting once a month, and it's every week, can you have like a news bulletin or anything that comes up that you could send out to us to let us know of anything that's pending?
I surely can. And those are also updated every Friday on the PPACG website. So if you are interested in what is going on each week, it would be ppacg.org/leg, L-E-G. And it is right there. It says PPACG bill positions. It's updated with, as of that Friday, where the bill is, what the PPACG position is, and a very short summary from me of what I understand that the bill means. 2 sentences, maybe 3. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I know, it never happens. Yeah. So, at our last meeting, we went over the bills that had been reviewed. The ones that you had, and those were the ones that had been discussed at the January 13th Legislative Committee meeting. At the February 10th committee meeting, they discussed a variety of other bills. House Bill 2012-20 is a Veterans Community Living Center Services Assessment. This is a bill we are actively supporting, and the reason for that is this bill is going to do the assessment to determine where the next Veterans Living Center should be. This is kind of a retirement home for veterans. There's none in El Paso County. Without this study, we can't get one. So there's some importance to this study. Obviously, it doesn't guarantee anything for our region, but not only is it an important option, several of our delegation members are prime sponsors on it, specifically Representative Mark Snyder, Representative Terry Carver, and Senator Pete Lee. So it's a very broad bill and very wide bill. Any questions on this bill?
We have a cemetery, so we should have a, there's something. There you go. So we need something in between, right?
So the other bill that I'm actually going to go into any detail on is the next one, which is House Bill 2012-33. This is basic life functions in public spaces. This is one that we are actively opposing. It is a bill that states that local governments of any type cannot restrict life functions, specifically regarding homeless individuals, unless you are able to guarantee them housing or other services in a provided location by your municipality. You cannot stop them. The examples listed in this and that are kind of really brought up are people living in their cars. If it is, as long as it is parked in a legal spot, you can't tell them they have to move their vehicle. So that is a bill that will impact many different municipalities in a variety of different ways, and so that is a bill the Legislative Committee is opposing.
Who's the sponsor?
None of our delegation is on it, so I don't have that. I pay attention to what our delegation does.
It's
Well, you can't vote for them, they're not local.
It's not ours.
Yeah.
Not ours.
It was actually heard at the Capitol today at 1 o'clock. I haven't heard back from my lobbyist, but hopefully it died. So, a couple of quick others that I'm going to go over. Senate Bill 148 is a property tax exemption for value adjustments. It's one we supported. Senate Bill 157, vacation of roadways by municipalities or counties. We monitored that. It already died. That bill was designed so that if a municipality was asked to give back a roadway, that they could charge someone for it if they wanted to. The 1137 broadband grant certification of unserved areas, that bill will allow, if it passes, a local government statement of we're an unserved population to actually count for the broadband committee, the statewide broadband committee that determines where those grant funds go. Senate Bill 128 is the generation and transmission cooperative easement for broadband. This is one we monitored. It died already. It would have allowed local governments to partner with commercial broadband and other entities, but had some details about easements and things like that that we monitored. 1095 is a local government water elements and master plans. This bill has not been reviewed yet, so we have not taken a position. It is one we've been asked to.
Jessica, while you're on that bill, before I sorry to interrupt, 1095 has already passed the House and it's already in Senate appropriations. So time's running really short on a pretty important bill. I know that the session's just been crazy busy. So what does your process look like for this with legislative committee and then going to board for official positions before asking your lobbyists to take action?
So the legislative committee reviews the bills and suggests a position. Occasionally that position is monitored so they can ask staff or community members for more information, but typically they take a position. That position is then emailed out to the board of directors that night. We say, do you have any objections? The PPACG policy is we take no legislative positions unless they're unanimous. The board members are then given 3 days to respond. As long as we hear no objections, that is the formal position of PPACG, and our lobbyist is given direction to begin the activity as directed. In many cases, some bills are We will take a position, but it is not one our lobbyist will engage on. There's a lot of things that are great ideas, and we support our legislators. Giving disabled veterans state park passes, even if they don't have the license plate, is a great thing. We don't need to push it. So that's kind of a process question for that. This bill is one that was brought up to us because the Planners Association is looking at it. And it is one that we've brought up a few times but haven't taken a position on yet because the may-shall issue, whether it was requiring local master plans to factor in state water plannings, was an issue. That amendment was just made last week. So that is part of the reason we don't have a position on it yet. So does that answer the process question?
Yes.
And then after that, just so you know, it does go to the board again for a ratification at the official board meeting. The position is already taken. It is already formal. Our lobbyist has already begun acting on it by that point. Any questions on any of the bills? And I'll put the plug out again. If you know of any bills that you think that you'd like us to take a look at, or if you're hearing about something that you think you want to know more about, hopefully you all have my email, and if you don't, please let me know. I'll make sure you do. Send me a message, and I'll happily look it up for you and tell you where things are and what's going on.
I do have a question regarding one of the bills. It's a little later on in your sheet.
Okay.
It's one that we discussed last month, SB 2094, plug-in electric motor vehicle registration fees.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually to support with moving the funding from HPTE to HUTF. Again, we go with those awesome acronyms. Did we find out why the fees increase over time?
We didn't, and I think that bill died. So
I was looking into that, and I think I have an idea on that. When our registration now on vehicles tapers off year after year based on the value decreasing. In other words, we don't have the same registration fee every year. It's less and less.
Correct.
So I think the person who wrote this bill wanted to counter that because the idea of an electric vehicle lasting longer would mean less tax revenue for the state.
Subarus last over 500,000 miles. But I'm so sorry.
I know.
Anyway, so I'm sorry, you said it died?
give me a second, I'll double check.
Thank you. Okay, I got it. I
Yeah,
understand.
I did notice that.
Yeah, it died on the 13th.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, okay. Thank you all, and please follow back up with me if you need anything.
Okay, I do have one question, it has nothing to do with any of these bills. Where are we on the death penalty? They were up till
on the what?
3 o'clock.
We are now in 22nd state
Yeah.
to
Outlawed, okay. All right, so it did go. Outlaw the death penalty. Okay.
All right, let's move on to mobility coordination. Yep.
Back up to you, John.
All right, since this is a information item, and I believe the chair, your request is to rip through these.
Yep.
I'm going to try to rip through it. If I go too fast or I do something, you will have to see this item again, or feel free to ask any questions. So currently, there is a requirement for if you operate a transit service, to operate comparable transit service within, I believe it's half mile or mile, whatever it is. That's basically, Mountain Metro is your transit system, and Mountain Mobility is that ADA service that is required by the feds. Then there's anything that we do, what's called above and beyond. Historically, the above and beyond has been administered through Mountain Metro Transit under contract to what we call human service providers, or HSPs. HSPs include Silver Key, Envita, Fountain Valley Senior Center, and one other. So those folks have been under contract with MMT, And the funding cocktail for that has been Federal Transit Administration, or FTA 5310 funds, MM2, or Colorado Springs General Fund, PPRTA transit dollars, and Older Americans Act, or AAA funding that is administered through PPACG. All right, here's where we can try to rip. So now, the Mountain Metro and the service providers, about 6 months ago, maybe a little longer, had sort of come to a place where they were like, you know, this might work better, as we've seen in other parts of the state, including Denver and DRCOG, if we moved this particular service under PPACG. They already have the AAA, and they are adept at using the 5310 funds. So we've started this process now where PPACG may become the designated recipient of 5310 funds. And back to the acronyms, when they write the federal transportation bills, you have all sorts of clever names for programs, like Rails to Trails and things like that under FHWA. FTA is not quite as imaginative. They just named the fund source after the section of the bill that it's under. So under Section 5310 of the bill is the talk about the elderly and disabled mobility funding. So that would be the funding that they're looking to move over to PPACG, as well as having the AAA, which is already sort of initiated here at PPACG, come in-house, and then we would administer the program. It's not a done deal yet. We're about 95% away through. We still have to negotiate some different things. But the upshot of all of this is eventually, hopefully, those human service providers would then follow a PPACG process to get those contracts to provide those services. Why do you care, or why is that sort of coming through you as one of those things? First off, we want to make sure that everyone is in the loop and knowing that these things are happening, because there's some different information out there. But secondly, what we'd like to do, or what we plan on doing, is adding this fund source, these $5310, to our existing TIP process, just like anything else. So as you see those TIP amendments and those TIP documents come through and everything else, these would be sort of the same sort of projects you'll be seeing in the future if, in fact, it comes under House through PPACG. Time. How do you do, Mr. Chair?
Good.
All right.
Questions?
What would be your educated guess about how soon Council of Governments would take over that role and start operating in that fashion?
So the educated guess is that we're trying to get a 5310 grant right now under MMT, because they are the designated recipient. If they provide that funding and we're able to hire a position here shortly, it could be by the end of the year, because what's required is that you write a plan, and that you send that draft plan to FTA for review, and you also then petition the governor to become the designated recipient. That letter is pretty much, I don't want to say perfunctory, but pretty much, if we send a letter and FTA says you really should sign it, odds are the governor is going to sign it, and then FTA then is allowed to approve your plan, and then you can start becoming the designated recipient and start processing a grant process. We let people know how much money is available, how they can get it, what's eligible. Then you would process those different grants to go through the process. So I'm thinking by the end of the year, we might have the designation. Again, if everything goes well. I don't want to jinx it, but it's not a done deal because we're still negotiating some things. But by the end of the year, we could have that designation, and then by the middle of next year, we might be actually doing our first grant process, by which we're letting people know the funds are available and the eligibility. We would start processing that.
And how long has DRCOG been operating under this kind of arrangement?
I believe they just got their approval from FTA. So they submitted their stuff. The governor took about 3 weeks, I think, to sign off on their letter. And now FTA, I think, just approved their letter. So they're now just sort of starting down that road.
Okay, thanks.
But I think as far as the template that we've been following, they've been sort of at this for a while. because everybody here wants us to take it over. That was not the case in Denver, so Dr. Cog had a much different process to convince everybody that this was an appropriate transfer.
Jim?
Is this strictly administering the flow of money for these transportation providers, or does this relate to the centralized coordination of ADA and senior transportation issues?
So ADA is very, just to make sure I'm answering this question correctly, ADA is very specific, and that it goes under that, again, the required ADA transportation that MMT handles through mountain mobility. But if you're talking about sort of this whole coordination of the human services providers and having them under one roof and coordinating, because right before, they could provide a ride, and if it was under this one thing, they had to provide X, and if it was under a different funding source, they had to provide Y. Yes, the idea is that by having it all in-house here at PPACG, we would have one standard set of rules, so hopefully it would make the service providers' life a little easier.
Is there a staffing challenge associated with that?
Yes, if we don't, like I said, we need to get that mobility coordinator on board to really sort of move forward with this. And we've made the sort of request to MMT to provide the 5310 funds for us to do that. So when we did the budget, we had the position in there as a thing, but not funded, and this would be the actual funding for that position.
Yes.
Any chances of including something like park counties where we pay neighbors to take neighbors to the doctor since we're so scattered? The buses are not practical.
Yeah, I think that that program used to be New Freedoms or something. So, yeah, actually, this particular funding for 5310 is within the urbanized area, so the MPO. So Park County is not within the MPO, so that would not be a possibility. That being said, I don't know what AAA has outside of that, so I don't want to say no for other fund sources, but 5310, that is a no.
Shucks.
Hey, you can't grill me.
I'm going to chime in real quick. The AAA funding does include transportation in Park County. It is up to the service providers in each region to apply for funding.
I just have a comment. First, thank you for giving the update. I think it was back in end of November, early December that I was yelling at you guys about it. So I appreciate the
Yelling is such a strong term. It was just more inflection that no.
I do appreciate it because I think part of our job is to make sure that we address that and providing the services for our community. I just wanted to confirm when you guys take over, whenever that is, will the users be impacted? Will they notice any kind of a disconnect, or are you guys working towards hopefully a seamless transition?
So I learned a long time ago there's certain things you can promise and certain things you can't. This is not something I can promise, but in theory, it's the same human service providers before that are providing the service after. So if you pick up the phone and called Silver Key or whatever before and you utilize that system, you're still going to utilize that system. It's just that clearinghouse of how those trips get paid for now comes through PPACG rather than MMT. So in theory, no, they would not see any sort of difference. In fact, we're hoping that they would see an overall improvement due to efficiencies. Additionally, we believe that we can help with the overall reporting. And again, not to bore you with all the federal details, as you report your trips, the feds reward you with more dollars. So we believe by fixing the National Transit Database reporting for the region, that more dollars eventually, probably about 2 years because of the lag, we'll actually see more dollars into the region as a result.
Well, thank you for taking it over, whether it was coerced or voluntary. Really
hasn't happened yet. Don't jinx it.
Oh, okay.
So I have a question about what's the magnitude in dollars, resources as far as hiring people and any other kind of software and anything else that's going to be an extra?
So we haven't done all of our due diligence, so I'm going to talk in generalities. The position will be funded through a 5310 grant that the Mountain Metro has. Again, not to like ruin the negotiation between a potential employee, in other words, but the overall loaded cost, which means all of the building and utilities and everything else, is around $100,000 as that cost. Again, those are federally aid eligible dollars through the 5310 program. They're considered capital because it's an initiation, so it's an 80-20 split. So of that $100,000, $80,000 would be for federal dollars that haven't found a home yet, and then one of the challenges that we're having is identifying that other $20,000 as the match for that particular position.
But it's one employee.
One employee. We believe that we do that. You had some other things, and I was going to answer them, but my little brain just...
Well, I wanted to know what the magnitude of the 5310 money.
5310 is about $450,000 a year. Of that, I believe 10% is administration, so I think it's around $405,000 is for actual rides, and the other the 45 is to do some of these other things, which I believe, again, because it's federal dollars, you can't match federal with federal, so that you can't use that to pay the match.
Not directly.
Right.
Any other questions? We all know it's fungible.
Earlier in December, when Tamara brought up the issue that we've seen, did I understand that there was a concern with some partners not being able to fulfill the need? Because all I see is 3 partners up there. What are we doing to expand, I guess, is my question, of those partnerships? Is there a plan in there to expand that?
No, but there is a fourth one, community intersections. I think that's the fourth one. So those would be the 4 that we would start with. That's the 4 that's been sort of there for a while. Again,
Do they fill the need?
Do they fill the need? I think,
I think the concern was there was a lot of conflict trying to fill the need, and so that was kind of the headache that's involved in terms of regular going to inherit themselves. Is that all the organizations wanted to serve, but there were so many criteria, rules, and requirements, and so did they fill the need as best as they could? I think the whole transition to it being overseen by PPACG is to better fill the needs and to have the service providers better meet their own needs and their own requirements and their own internal rules, and also serve the clients, the community. I don't know if I'm answering that correctly.
No, far better than I could. And again, need is a subjective, right? So right now you can say, are we doing it? There are some people that are getting their needs met, and they'd be like, yeah, we're great. There's other folks that would be like, yeah, well, it would be nice if I could get an additional ride here or there, and that sometimes those don't necessarily happen. So I think the idea is that the intent is to make sure that we're meeting the need, but it depends on how you define need and if you're within the circle or outside the circle. So we're not going to be everything to everybody, so we want to manage those expectations. But again, the thought is that overall, through the long term, the overall programs will be more efficient and therefore be able to provide more rides, that we would do better reporting, and then within 2 years, we'd also see that as an improvement, providing additional funds.
Any more discussion? All right, let's move on to 5C.
So, Catherine Winger again. So this item is to discuss our UPWP, one of those acronyms we have. It is our Unified Planning Work Program. This is a document that is federally required for us as an MPO. Because we spend federal dollars, we need to document how we're going to spend those dollars and what projects and items that are going to come out of our work here. And so that's what this document outlines, and we update it every 2 years, but we also often will do a mid-cycle update or an amendment to make sure that our budget and our activities that we've listed align with what's currently going on, or if there's any shifting priorities that might happen. And so that's what you're seeing here is our mid-cycle update, or the amendment that we're going to be doing. The main reason for the change this year is that we did hire a couple new people since this document was created, and we also have had some new shifting priorities towards like a safety campaign and towards a tri-county study. And so there are a couple of new items that we've added in there as new focuses or additional focuses, and we've shifted from the long-range plan, which we were working on heavily last year, and we're not going to be working on as heavily this year until we start ramping up the next one. And so you'll see shifting priorities and budgets in that way. And then we've also had some suggestions from our Federal Transit Administration partners asking us to include some more MMT and Federal Transit type wording in there as well. This month, it says on your memo that we are going to bring it back to you for action next month, but we're actually going to probably hold that off because we've received some more updated numbers from CDOT, and so we're going to update those and put those in the document once we get that situated. So you're most likely not going to see this for action next month, but we wanted to bring it to you for info anyways, just so you have an idea of the updates that we are making in this document. And take any questions?
I did not get attachment 1.
There was a table that had a bunch of every single adjustment. Did it not go through?
Wait. Is that this?
Yep.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
I
And then
got attachment 1.
Okay.
Good.
And attachment 2 was a link, and so it was an actual link to the full document that's currently adopted. So, yeah. And these are just all the proposed changes that we plan to make.
Any questions? Discussion? All right, Catherine, you can stay up and do 5D.
All right. Oops. All right, last one for me. Yeah, the last one total. All right, and so as we were discussing earlier, we, as an MPO, we're required to have a short-range transportation plan, or our TIP, as we call it, Transportation Improvement Program. It's the 4-year outline of federally funded projects in our region. And so every 2 years, we do a new document, and currently we are in 2019 through 2022, and
Yes.
we're in the process to adopt a new one, which is 21 through 24. And so because they're a 2-year overlap, we take the last 2 years of the previous document, roll those projects forward, and then do a call for projects for the last 2 years. So this would be 23 and 24. And we did that back last year in October when we received projects, submissions and applications, and did a workshop to kind of narrow those projects down based on scoring criteria. And from there, we created updated the document to the most recent projects that were proposed for selection. And then we held a public comment period, a 30-day public comment period, had an open house, received public comments through either we had an online submission form or people at the open house. And so we did receive comments, and that's what you have in attachment 2 are the public comments that we received and the staff response. The response so far is just a more general, thank you, we've received these and we will be forwarding your comments to those, the relevant jurisdictions, because some of these were project specific. And so we forward those on to see if they want to make any comments. Kind of the way this works is we provide the comments, and they are considered as part of the adoption process. It doesn't require that we make any changes or make any updates necessarily, but it does require us that we consider them. And so that is this, what you're getting now is that TAC, CAC, and the board will all receive all the comments that we received during that time frame, and we'll consider them. And then the following month, we will bring it back to you for adoption and let you know if there's been any changes or suggested changes based on those public comments. And hopefully the planned adoption is in April, and then this document would go into effect July 1, and the other one would be no longer in effect.
So we'll see this in April as an action item.
You will actually see it in March. It'll go to the board in April
March,
as action.
right.
Sorry.
Right.
It's
Sorry.
kind of a little bit off, but you'll see it in March as action.
So do your homework.
Yeah, and the link in attachment 1, it shows the full document, and it has all the projects listed for those 4 years that are in this document. So it's all there for you. And it also has a link to the public comments that we received.
And all that's up on the website.
So please
Yeah.
let me know if you have any comments. Yes,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah,
on the
you can-
website.
That's the best place to go to find out when the next meeting is and all kinds of information, so. That's it?
Yeah.
Anybody? All right,
That was
on
quick.
to member discussion. Well, if nobody else is going, I'll go. Some of you know, but most of you probably don't. We had an incident in our family, and I have to move to New York. The New York City area. Actually, it's going to be in Jersey City, but we're 2 blocks from the Hudson, so it's a bedroom community. It's where we're going to have to go. We're going to be, after raising 4 girls, we're going to try to raise 2 boys, 10 and 13. So, I'm glad you approved Aubrey, because she's the vice chair. And Shelley, you'd be glad to know I'm a block from the light rail and a block and a half from the PATH train, so, And I'm selling both my cars. Yeah, getting rid of both cars. Don't need cars. They're really expensive to keep cars. So this has been a great experience for me, and I really appreciate the dedication that all the members here have, both at the board level and at the CAC level. So it's not something we wanted to do. We're hoping we'd be here for the rest of our life, but life changes. So, yeah, I'm keeping my storage area in the building, and I'm renting out my current place. My my place in Jersey City, I have the lease right here, 740 square feet for $3,200 a month. But it doesn't include utilities, so that's on top of that, so. Yeah. Actually, most of the apartments are all electric for everything. That's why you pay it. This one, at least I have gas to cook with and some other things, so. My wife is there now. Well, she's back here now, but she leaves this weekend, but she has been there for the last month, and she'll go back permanently this Sunday. And I have a bunch of things to wrap up through March, but in April, I'll be leaving to go back.
Well, yes, Tim, we
Thanks.
really appreciate your service.
Thanks.
We really do, so thank you.
Thanks.
But we're sorry to see you leave, but
Yeah,
things
me
happen.
too.
Things happen, so.
Yeah, they do. Life creeps up on you every once in a
Yes,
while.
it does. So,
So,
thank you.
Any other member discussion items for the next meeting? Anybody? When are we getting our next GAP update? Do we know?
What's the question, sir?
GAP update?
Oh, gap update.
We get one like every other month or something like that.
Could we get one next
We'll get one
next meeting?
scheduled for next
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, we like to get those.
Yes, we do.
All right.
Construction's going on, travel is terrible. I don't work for CDC.
No, it's a gap.
But they fixed the pothole with hot
That's a
patch
good
instead of
question.
cold patch, so that was good. All right. Anything else? I hear nothing, I see nothing. We're out of here.
Okay, thank you.
We really will. So you're here next month too, right?
Yes, no,
You're not here for next month?
no, I won't be here for next